Former President Donald Trump is back in court this morning as opening statements begin today in his New York criminal trial. And a new doping scandal has erupted less than 100 days before the Summer Games in Paris. Good morning, I'm Kristen Wright with NPR News, and here are today's top stories. Prosecutors in New York will begin laying out their case against former President Donald Trump in opening statements today. NPR's Andrea Bernstein reports the case stems from the final weeks of the 2016 presidential race and an alleged affair.
In October of 2016, right before Election Day, not long after the Access Hollywood tape became public, the campaign is in a panic. Michael Cohen ends up paying Stormy Daniels out of his own pocket to keep her quiet. And then when Trump reimburses him, it's entered as, quote, a legal retainer 34 times, which is the basis for the 34 counts of falsifying business records.
Trump pleaded not guilty. The trial is expected to last 6 weeks. In Israel, efforts to get more hostages held by Hamas released have been marked by tensions between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his negotiating team. NPR's Peter Kenyon reports Netanyahu reportedly attacked members of the team during a meeting Sunday of his war cabinet.
Israeli media quote the prime minister as accusing members of his negotiating team of conducting false briefings that he said are seeding desperation among the families of the hostages. The discord comes after two Israeli news channels quoted unnamed members of the negotiating team as saying the prime minister appeared to be indifferent to the fate of the hostages and has undermined efforts to win their release. The Israeli negotiating team is led by top intelligence and military officials. Last November, negotiators reached a deal for a temporary ceasefire and the release of some 100 hostages in return for 240 Palestinian inmates released from Israeli jails. Peter Kenyon, NPR News, Jerusalem.
Passover begins at sundown. President Biden released a statement ahead of the Jewish holiday, reiterating his commitment to the security of Israel and a ceasefire in Gaza. A new Olympics sports doping scandal has erupted less than 100 days before the Summer Games in Paris. Nearly 24 athletes from China tested positive for a performance-enhancing drug before the last Summer Olympics, but the results were never disclosed. NPR's Brian Mann reports.
The World Anti-Doping Agency and Chinese officials now acknowledge that 23 elite Chinese swimmers tested positive for a powerful performance-enhancing drug called trimetazidine ahead of the Tokyo Games in 2021. They say the exposure was accidental, but they never reported the findings to sports officials from other countries. Travis Tigert with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency calls that decision a potential cover-up.
They haven't addressed why no provisional suspensions were put in place, why no announcement was made. That's mandatory under the rules.
Sports officials around the world are calling for an independent investigation. Some of the Chinese swimmers are expected to compete again in Paris. Brian Mann, NPR News, New York.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.